Bradley, what I can't remember. Have you, of what we've seen up to this point, do you have a clear favorite?
I think I've technically now seen them all the way through, except for the last one. I've not seen the last one all the way through. So, but my favorite so far, man, I've got them ranked right here. Let me see, because man, the Youth Killer, it wasn't up there, but I didn't hate it. I enjoyed it. Let's see. I've technically got, I've got Horror in the Heights and the Zombie Tide.
For number one.
Yeah, I'd have to rewatch both. The whole bus thing with the zombie was a little, I don't know, it gets me every time.
Like, yeah, you can't drop that. I know.
I can't drop it. I don't know, but I don't know, the pillow with Miss Emily in her shirt too, that got me. But I don't know, but I like both of those, so I'm gonna keep those tied until I finish the whole thing, and maybe we'll come back around to it. I did want to say one more thing about Kolchak, and this is like and I don't want to be like, I know there's this whole perception of a gatekeeping, and this is not gatekeeping at all with the series, but it seems like people who come to the series differently have different perspectives on the show. Like, for instance, Rich Haddam, friend of the show, started with the show, and he watched the Kolchack, the Night Stalker series, and he loves it. And then he went back and found the movies and fell even more in love with it. Where somebody like Rodney Barnes, writer, Winning Time, writes Philadelphia and all that stuff like that, he watched the first movie, and I don't think he came back to the series much later, and didn't come out till later. And then once you've got the high of the movie, he even says in one of our interviews that, I wasn't too much into I'm not as into the show as I was the movies. And I think people come to it different ways. How do you think that, like personally from you, how do you think that changes people's perspective depending on how you came from it?
No, absolutely. I mean, certainly the first movie is more frightening. The humor is meaner. I write about this little in the book. Like the Vincenzo Kolchak fights are pretty vicious and pretty dark. Like there's a great scene where Tony is wanting the story about the murdered prostitutes to be less gruesome, and Kolchak starts saying, "Oh, you want us to have them dancing in heaven with roses and rose petals?" And they'll be. And it's like really like, ooh, it's like super like kind of creepy, gothic, like unpleasant. And then as the series gets going, I think the first couple episodes are kind of keep that dark, like certainly the Ripper episode sort of feels a lot like the two movies, but then you get this very different tone. And so, Kolchak and Vincenzo, they fight, but it's like old married couples. The barbs are like all humorous. It's all with tongue in cheek. So I think if you came in late and you had that Kolchak, which was, let's say 70% humor, 30% horror, then that is your comfort zone. And when you get to the Night Stalker, which is like 80% horror, 20% humor, that doesn't feel right. And the same is true if you started with the Night Stalker, the original movie, and you're expecting this to be mainly about horror and investigation and death and gruesomeness, and you get to an episode like, The Sentry or The Youth Killer, where it's like, this is kind of just making fun of dating. Like this could be a Love Boat episode if it weren't for people dying. Like it's actually not that far off, right? So absolutely, and I think that's the great thing about Kolchak is there are lots of things for people to love, and that's also part of how it became so influential. Is it sort of said to future TV makers, if you can get horror and humor and interesting kind of sets and places and plot devices together, and you balance that right, you will get your audience. And certainly that's what Chris Carter did, and Eric Kripke and Joss Whedon and all those other great creators, all of whom kind of explicitly say Kolchak is where they got their inspiration.
Yeah. Robert, where do you want to go from here? Is there anything else
we're just a hair over an hour, and I had told Kendall that I'm not at my office, so I don't have as much time restrictions, but so we can keep on going. We certainly have been able to do that. I would say let's just mention some details about your book.
Sure.
And when that's coming out for people, if you want to give any plugs for people that helped you with it and those types of things. What can you say about that, Kendall?
Well, first and foremost is Mark Dawidziak. And so Mark is, this was my Bible, if you could see, if you had the video, like this is, you can see, like I got it marked up to pieces. Mark is amazing. I believe I've heard that there's going to be maybe a second edition to this coming out. I've heard that may be happening. So I would say to everybody, get this. if you have a few extra pennies, you can buy my book. But Mark is without a doubt the most knowledgeable Kolchak. I think probably the most knowledgeable 1970s TV person, period, bar none. So I am the biggest fan of his. But I'm also, I was just very grateful to the amazing folks at Wayne State University Press. I'll say a word about this. So part of the inspiration for writing this was I loved the show as a young person, but part of it was, seeing this Wayne State TV milestone series. And I have a friend here at Syracuse who wrote a book about Twin Peaks. And so I started looking at this series, and I think it's very nice to have these sort of relatively short, tight, concise books. They're kind of mainly all saying, here's why this show deserves to be recognized. And I started looking and seeing Twin Peaks, and I saw X-Files, I saw Twilight Zone. I started thinking, hey, wait a minute, the show that was so influential on so much of television is missing. And I kind of thought to myself, I don't know that anybody else is going to stand up and say, I want to make the case for Kolchak being a TV milestone, a really important moment in TV history. And so I'm very thankful to the great folks at Wayne State University Press who were open to me saying, hey, even though this TV series only lasted 20 episodes and never had good ratings, let me try to make the case to say this is actually an important moment in TV history. And they've been incredibly supportive ever since. So I'm very fortunate, and I'm glad. Again, I'd say to all the fans out there, Mark's book is your definitive history. But if you want the book to help answer the question when people say, well, why do you like that series? I think that's what this book does. This book at least tells people, even if you don't like Kolchak, it's important. And it changed the way you watch television. And so I think that's really what this book is all about.
Yeah. And I can tell you just from reading, and I haven't finished it or probably read as much as Robert has, but I can tell you just from reading through it, I would call this a companion to the companion that Mark wrote, because this is it's a whole different take on Kolchak and why it's important. And whereas Mark's is the Bible of Kolchak, this is maybe the Gnostic Gospels. I don't know. That's probably a bad one too.
I would call it the hymnal.
The hymnal. There you go.
You study this, but this you can sing along to.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. Because just reading through it, there's a lot of great information in there, a lot of great questions posed. And I mean, you're coming at it from a perspective of, in the decade since, let's take a look at it. Let's dive into Kolchak in the decade since. Why is this important? Even, man, God, going on close to, what is it, 50 years later, 70, 80?
Yeah, this is the 50th anniversary of the original
film. And then, so, man, just it's something that can definitely have a spot on your shelf beside the original novels and the Kolchak companion, and from some of those great Moonstone books and comics that you got up there too. Another great Kolchak book to add up there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's coming out in August. It'll be out in mid-August. There's some copies already out there, but it'll be available in mid-August. It's relatively short and relatively cheap. So you can pay a couple pennies and have this slipped in next. And it's very small, so it doesn't take up much space. So you can put it right next to the comic books, and it's perfect place.
Yeah, that's great. And hey, maybe we can buy a copy and we can give it out on the show or something for a live stream or something. That'd be pretty cool. Because Kendall, I'd love to have you back, man, and get you and Mark in the same room just chopping it up. Because I feel like we put Mark in so many shows. Like we're like, hey, Mark, we're gonna have you, like we're setting him up like a speed dating or something. I don't know. Because
I'm in love with him, so that's fine. I'm absolutely he's amazing.
Hey, we are
very
too,
helpful. I will say, he not only the book, but he was very helpful. I was able to send him a couple of questions and things, and he is, often when people are kind of the definitive source on something, when other people come and say, hey, I'm going to write about this, they can be very territorial, very defensive. Mark is the opposite, the most gracious, supportive. He was always saying, good luck with the book. And the couple of questions I was able to ask him, he would answer quickly and say, let me know. So just the most gracious human being. So if I had any chance to spend time with Mark, I will be a happy camper.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I can remember exactly the time that Mark and I were having a long conversation about my other pursuits that I want to do with the podcast and recognizing Jeff Rice. And he mentioned that he'd spoken to you, and, just went on and on and on about it. So it was, just great to hear that what I like to think of as the Kolchak legacy just continues. And it really, I had no idea that, James Aquilon was going to come along and offered this contest and put together this, incredible graphic novel and short stories compilation with the things that he does, and that's making Kolchack live on. So I think that's just fantastic.
And I am a
That's
supporter
doing
of that. I'm waiting to get my copies. I'm super
Oh,
excited.
All of us
I was
are.
in early, so yeah.
Bradley may be the only one on the screen who is a contestant in that. I got too frustrated with changing my story around too often, so I never submitted. And Bradley, I don't know if you're going to break any news yet, if you've been selected
I haven't
or
been.
not.
He's still waiting to contact people, so
Yeah.
I probably haven't. But it was definitely a fun experience either way. And I sent it to Mark, and he gave me the old Mark seal approval, and that's all. That's the only seal approval I need, really.
That's
If
good.
Mark Dawidziak says it's good, it's good. But yeah, Kendall, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if there's anything else we need to talk about, but is there anywhere we can find you? I know you mentioned your Twitter earlier. Is there any way people can get in contact with you if they just want to learn more about the book or learn more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on Twitter at Dark Projections, which is the combination of two of my earlier book titles. I don't know why I chose that, but I did. I'm also, you can find me on Facebook on the Kolchack group, so you can certainly reach out to me on that. I'm a professor at Syracuse University, so you can find me there. I should also say I am also a podcaster. Heaven help us. I have a podcast called Pop Life that's produced here at WAER and goes out through National Public Radio. So if people are looking for general pop culture conversation where I talk less and ask questions more, come check us out at Pop Life WAER.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, guys, if you've seen me pop in and out frequently, it has been checking on, I told Kendall, my hellhounds that are here with me today. And right now I've got one outside the door just panting, looking at me like, let me in. Well, too bad. I've gotten up too many times for him. He's just going to have to stay out there a little bit longer. He's got fresh water. We'll let him just keep doing that. And as far as I can tell, yeah, the gate's still closed, so we're good. But yeah, Kendall, thank you so much for being so quick to respond to my request to have you come on and talk to us. And then for us to be able to set all this up, this worked out perfectly for me. For the stuff that I had going on, thought I was going to do it at work, but was able to take advantage of being here at home and doing it. And yeah, we'd love to have you back, and we can talk about any number of topics. I think we already covered any number of topics. Bradley, I joked with him at the beginning because I told him how many of his other things I've read already that I've gotten summaries about. Like, man, I could talk about those all day. And he said, well, we could do that as well. Just made a regular Bradley podcast because we won't stay on topic.
Wow.
For Kolchack. Threw you under the bus on that one. But, you were there for a little bit of Kolchack. So that's good. We still did it.
Yeah.
And thank you to Jeff Colburn for calling in some questions for us and being able to play those and get those wonderful responses from Kendall. And Kendall, I want to end with a little bit of a guess on what your middle name is. And mine's an S, and no one ever gets my middle name because it's almost impossible to get. But Bradley, put you on the spot. What do we think with a name like Kendall and R and Phillips? Where do you want to go with the R? He's from Texas.
Randolph.
That's pretty good. Now, if he's Texas, it could be a Southern tradition. It could be somebody's last name. So I'm going to throw out that it's Kendall Reynolds Phillips. Have no idea. That's what I'm going to go with. Kendall, what do you want to divulge what your middle name is?
It's Robert.
No, I wish you were more. I wish you were more interested. It's Ray. So it's a long
Kendall
tradition
Ray. That's very Southern.
Kendall Ray. My father's name was Cecil Ray.
Nice.
So the Ray middle name has kind of traveled through a couple of generations. Yes, I'm fortunate that my father's name was Cecil. My brothers were Donald and Ronald, and when I came along, they had run out of names. So my first name was picked out of a baby book, randomly picked out of a baby book, but I got the Ray middle name. So, but guesses, I may switch it to Randolph just for fun.
Yeah, it could be, you could have like your same first name be like one letter off from your last name. So at least it's not like that, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
He's, he never listens to us, so it doesn't matter. We have a mutual friend that we podcast with, Daryl Darnell, whose name is very similar, and he has an Entering the Fifth Dimension and a very successful Stranger Things podcast right now with his daughter.
Oh, cool.
Talk to him about that. He's got somewhere around 18,000 listeners, Bradley. I don't know if you've ever checked in with him on that or not, but that's a pretty hefty number.
That's great.
But anyway, I digress. So once again, Kendall, thank you so much for doing this. We love to talk about this idea about how in Kolchack's loop, we sort of start in the middle with Kolchack, and then we go outside of that to make a loop around it all. So next time you'll find us, folks, you can get us here inside the loop. Okay, there's the official ending, Kendall.
Yeah.
Fantastic,
are
man. Thank
great.
you so much. That
I've
was
listened
great.
to so many of your episodes. It was fun to actually be talking to you. Sometimes I had to remind myself I have to respond because I was waiting. What he's going to say? So it's great.
It's
Yeah.
hilarious because I almost did a somersault when you said I'm a fan. I was like, what? He's a
No,
fan? That
absolutely
can't
not.
be.